Good evening, everybody. Okay, as we get started tonight, here we are, 90 months, 153 events. Nutty people. Okay, Ed Pace is going to say the invocation. Please stand and go from there. And after that, we'll do the flag salute, so stay standing.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, it is so good to be in this place, standing on your holy ground and breathing your holy air. It's so good to be gathered with brothers and sisters, friends in liberty, friends grounded in the Constitution, friends who want to help make America great again. Lord, we ask that you would bless everybody here in their various ministries, in their churches, in their work in politics and government. We ask that that all of us would be sensitive to your guidance. Listen always to your Holy Spirit and follow it. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Please follow me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Thank you, Ed. I'm like a one-arm mechanic here tonight.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, so what are we doing here? Okay, now we got, okay, upcoming events. I know I lost some paper here. Okay, so we have, what's first? What's second? Friday morning breakfast. So, Rob, you want to say a real quick word about Friday morning? What's going on? There he is. Too close.
Okay, Friday morning is Friday morning, and it's at 7 a.m. in the morning. Like this Friday, day after tomorrow, we'll have Larry Haskell, the prosecuting attorney for the county, will speaking. He's a good speaker. He's kind of a Renaissance man, so he could be all over the place. So he's open for any questions anybody would like to ask him. The following week, we have a young man, Jeremy, I can't remember his last name, but he's going to be talking about cryptocurrencies and hopefully making it more clear to us what those things are. And plus, we'll have Matt Shea and Bob McCaslin Jr. will be giving us their Olympia thing. So we got some good things coming up. The next Saturday, usually I try to stay 3 ahead, is to be determined. I've got a couple people I need to hear back from. But, it's coffee and a donut. It's $5 admission, and we all have a good time. And usually there's about, at least 20 people that come to that thing. So I know some of you come to it. So if you haven't tried it, if you're looking for something to do on a Friday morning, stop by and be edified. You'll actually get to see a lot of your representatives face to face and ask them questions. And that's a great thing about local government's a foundation of our republic, that you can get that close to people and talk to them. So I think, No Lie Brewery, if everybody knows where that's at, it's at Trenton Hamilton. Inside the No Lie Brewery is the Bangkok Thai restaurant, and of course no one's really in the mood for Thai food at that time in the morning, so we get to use their facility, and that's where the $5 goes. We don't make anything out of it.
You could tie one on.
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Rob. Okay, also, Caper is a great group. If you don't know what Caper is, they're off until the end of August. In September they'll start again, but property rights, really an important issue, and they're a good group. They know what they're talking about, so that's something to look into. And then the Constitution Party, I know it's Thursday in August. Last time it was June 15th, so I don't know what day it is. Oh, Dave, would you know by any chance? No, you wouldn't. Okay, wrong guy. That's good. Yeah, you got a chuckle out of those who know. Anyway, okay, so I don't know the date. Okay, and we don't know what we're going to do next month, but it's going to be a whopper, whatever it is. Okay, now I'd like to encourage y'all, in case you're not on already, we have a few Facebook groups we'd really like to, have you hook up with. So first one is Spokane Liberty Caucus, and John Christine is a moderator there, and it's a great group. Been around for quite a while, a lot of good members, good discussions there, local issues. Secondly is our Facebook page here, Northwest Grassroots. We're up over, I think we're getting close to 600 members. That's not bad. It's really pretty good. Good discussion there. And we try to keep the discussions on the different pages different. There's times that I'll post things over at Spokane Liberty Caucus that more pertains to that, so you can kind of dial in and get it. And then if you're a Trump supporter, our Facebook group here for Pacific Northwest, the President Trump group is growing good, and it's got great people on it, wonderful comments, smart page. I like it a lot. Okay, now we're going to move into open mic, and tonight we're going to take it a little out of order. We're going to break it up and bring up Mike Fagan first because he's got to get back to work. Make sure this is on. There you go. There you go. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, John. Hey, good evening, fellow deplorables. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good.
That is great. I do have a couple of things that I definitely need to get out to you. First and foremost, as far as City of Spokane business is concerned, as you folks well know, we have an opportunity to vote in November on a sanctuary city repeal initiative. Just know that we are being fought tooth and nail right now. As a matter of fact, August 25th in Superior Court here in the City of Spokane, the Center for Justice is trying to sue in order to remove that initiative off of the ballot, and I don't really hold a whole lot of hope that they're going to be successful. So the other initiative that we've got to give you guys an opportunity to vote on in November, it will be whether or not we are going to be imposing fines and additional restrictions on the shipment of coal and oil train only in the City of Spokane. That's an interesting one. In the next couple of days, as my associates have bought off on and are promoting a local web page and a group of people who are providing safe spaces in our sanctuary city, please be looking at my Facebook posts over the next couple of days, and I will definitely provide you all with a copy of that URL so that you can check it out for yourself, and whatever else happens after that, that's up to you. What we got coming up on Monday night, we're actually going to be looking at a resolution which would approve the idea of putting together the pro and the con committees to provide the pro and con statements for both of these initiatives. So you might want to cast an eye on cable channel 5 to watch that particular meeting and get some additional details. Now, in addition to that, I'm going to go ahead and switch hats right now. For those folks that don't know, I happen to be co-founder and co-director of the most successful taxpayer advocacy organization in Washington, known as Voters Want More Choices. Tim Iman, Jack Fagan, my dad, and myself, we've been on the scene in Olympia for the last 18 years. And you want to talk about striking when the iron is hot? Here's our latest initiative, ladies and gentlemen, going back to the $30 license tabs. Now, believe it or not, this is the third iteration of the $30 license tabs. I mean, you know, with our 2/3 supermajority on the state legislature, we had to do that one 6 times, and the legislature still hasn't got the message. Some of them have, but not all of them, and we haven't been able to be successful enough to get that vote put on a ballot for a constitutional amendment. But we have done the $30 license tabs twice. We've been successful both times. This is our third iteration, and just really quickly, let me tell you what it's going to do, and this is in general. It will repeal the weight fees and other vehicle taxes and fees imposed by state government. It eliminates vehicle fees imposed by cities, also known as the TBD, the $20 extra license tab fee that you get charged if you live in the City of Spokane. And it stops all Sound Transit's car tab taxes. That's that $54 billion ST3 boondoggle that's happening over there in the Tri-Counties on the west side. It also repeals the vehicle valuation schedule that Sound Transit and other governments are using to artificially inflate and dishonestly calculate your vehicle taxes. It is based on your MSRP and not Kelley Blue Book, as we are requiring or asking for in the latest initiative. The initiative guarantees your $30 license tab for cars, trucks, vans, SUVs, motorcycles, motorhomes, fifth wheels, and other vehicles. In other words, $30 means $30. I did bring a stack of these initiatives and would greatly appreciate it if everybody in this room, I'll put them on that back table, grab at least one, maybe multiple copies, pass them around to your friends, your family, your coworkers, congregation members. I'm telling you, this is a hot one. When I said striking while the iron is hot, the time is now for this particular initiative here. The deadline for this is the 31st of December. okay? You know, that slide that you guys saw with regard to CAPR, the Citizens Alliance for Property Rights, very, very good organization. I happen to be a board member for the Spokane County CAPR, and even though we haven't set a date quite yet, sometime in September, latter part of September, we are going to be engaged in our second annual East Meets West Conference in Ellensburg at CWU campus. And what we're going to be doing there specifically is we're going to be discussing the Hearst decision, how that impacts the rural community and sector, and what it is that we can do to stoke up that fire on the fight for our water rights. Because it's not just the Hearst decision that's hurting us now. Municipalities and county governments are now engaging in restriction of water rights, extending those water rights, water banking, and things like that. And, you know, you guys probably heard the old adage that World War III, what is it going to be all about? Water. Here we are, folks. It's on our doorstep. The last thing that I want to say is, as I reported last month, I had occasion to find, develop, back, encourage, if you will, 3 candidates for Spokane City Council. One candidate in each of the 3 districts. And 2 of my 3 candidates made it through to the general election. That would include Tim Ben, who's vying for Amber Waldorf's seat in Northeast District 1, Matthew Howes, who is a pizza pub shop owner over in the Northwest, vying against Candace Mumm, and unfortunately, Tony Keepy didn't quite make it through. But there is another candidate. His name is Andy Denow. I understand he is a moderate Democrat, which, mind you, is a heck of a lot better than what we are currently seeing with Brian Beggs on the Spokane City Council. I do understand that Better Spokane, through Michael Cathcart, Mike Allen, and Steve Salvatore, has brought up Andy Denow. I haven't had occasion to meet with Andy, although I do know him. But would definitely encourage everybody here to reach out to Andy, sit down with him, discuss you know, the issue of City of Spokane politics, and see what you can do to extend some support. Because again, what we've got going on in the Northwest with Candace Mumm, what we got going on in the South with Brian Beggs is really ugly. And if these guys end up getting through the November election, it's going to get even uglier. All right? Everybody have a good evening. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. Let's see. At my back? Yep.
How many thousand signatures do you need?
325,000.
We should be able to get that.
If you can, you bet. When we did Initiative 695 back in 1999, we got over 500,000. And it was purely a volunteer effort back then. All the polling shows this has got an 85% chance of getting on the ballot. Don't take, you know, don't get complacent based on that. We got to work hard and we got to be diligent, but we can get it done. So I'll get these initiatives on this back table. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Just before we jump into this, also just right before I left to bring the equipment down tonight, Freedom Foundation just filed a lawsuit against the unlawful, on behalf of the 19 Seattle residents, 19, that would, it's about the income tax in King County. They sued them. It's awesome. That's something to applaud for, I'm telling you. I want to get rid of that. Yeah, what happens in King County winds up getting over here, you know, it just looks, it's just pathetic. Okay, so what do we got going on? So, I love the sign here. It says it took, what it says, it took 2 years for the 3 prior administrations to totally destroy this nation and her people. In Trump's first 6 months, he began the major unwind of all the prior traitorous issues. And this is up on our Facebook page, and it's also up on the President Trump page as a document. You can just download it, but we're not going to go through all these. There's just so many things that he's done. It's just, I mean, it's incredible stuff. I saw that just here this month already that the jobs are now up over 1 million. That's just astounding. And not to throw this on top of it, it should be on slide 7, but did you see what China just demanded from the United States? over this Korea thing. The threat coming back from them is that they're going to turn off all the iPhones. You know how there's always been this tin hat thing going on about the phones made in China, that they might be putting something in it. Well, they're threatening that they have, and that came from China. So it's kind of crazy, but you'll see it. It just came out. All right. We've got, there was way more than 41 bills now. Reversed Dodd-Frank. I mean, Cecily just jumped up and down. I mean, it looks like just 3 words and it means so much for what, the way we do business and the way homeowners are treated here. Amazing stuff. And then if I get to the end of this, here so far just in this month, we have rescinded the EPA Waters of the United States Act. And look what that covers. That actually goes back, it covers the Clean Water Act, the EPA's Act, the Federal Water Pollution Control Act. It will affect Shoreline Management Act. It's got to filter down, and it could affect the Hearst decision. So we'll have to wait and see how this all turns out, but it's all in process. And here's the really cool thing. I talked to Brian Danzel the other day, Senator Danzel, and he was the one who authored this particular executive order. Working with the other people that are involved in the team there, but very exciting, and he's now unblacklisted so he can talk to people, so that's a good thing too. All right, and then also the rescinding the military transgender policy. I know that really had a lot of people flipped out when they were noticing that that our military had started the implementation of that training, and they were really upset about it, and rightfully so. And it was just amazing that from the time that training started until he rescinded, it was less than a month. Just less than a month. So really, he moves on stuff as soon as he finds out. That's what I'm seeing. Okay, so, and then I love this one. This is a great picture. I don't want to speak it, but it's right there. That's why he won. So, anyway, we need to get rid of those people up on top. I have a feeling our president's going to be out on the campaign trail big time this fall. Don't you think so? I think he's going to go to all the states where people are at risk and tell them to replace them. And I think that, I just can't wait. Nothing like that kind of pressure. Okay, statewide issues. So now we're going to invite up to the front Representative Shea and Bob McCaslin and Mike Padden. Hi, guys. Can I get you to stand between the lines that are flat? Wait, actually, if you go,
We're gonna just do one at a time.
okay, but you don't have. Okay, but you can go over here. I don't care. All you're going to do is cover yourself up. So, but come closer. Come closer to the.
Can we drill a well in these boundaries?
You can drill a well here, but that's what I'm saying. Just stay there. Okay, good deal. Have fun.
Thank you so much for being here tonight, everybody. It's a pleasure to be back from Olympia. To give kind of a short summation of kind of what's going on, I think the governor's starting to be a little bit lonely. He was seen walking around the government mansion grounds the other day, and he found one of those magic lanterns. And of course he rubbed it, and out came the genie and said, "Your wish is my command. You can have one wish." And he says, "Well, I want to be the smartest man in Washington State." And the genie said, "Well, it's your lucky day. You're going to have a couple of choices. Either I can turn you into Matt Shea or Mike Padden." So I hear he still doesn't want to be the smartest man in Washington. So, well, longest session in state history, $5 billion increase in spending. In 2003, we had a budget that was $23 billion, and by 2019, we'll have a $50 billion budget. It'll doubled. So that's problematic. What I'm going to talk about real quick are some of the education issues and some of the things that I worked on. We all have things to share, so I'm going to make mine fairly quick. So we're now spending 52% of the state budget on public education, and that's unsustainable. And I ran into a teacher the other day, and she said, well, we need more revenue. We need more taxes. And I said, no, we need more jobs. We need more people working. That's how you get more revenue. And she disagreed with me. But so after putting all of this money into K-12 education, we do have a teacher shortage, and I think that's a direct result of the teachers union telling their members that they're not paid nearly well enough. And I think it's the opposite. There's all kinds of studies that were done that really prove that teachers have done better than 90% of the population financially, especially during the recession. So a few bills that I worked on. One was House Bill 1654, and this was one of the few bills that passed unanimously through the House and the Senate. And it basically what it does is expands opportunities for people to get teaching credentials. One of the things that we need to do to liven up the teacher ranks is to get people from the business side, and also some of those classroom aides in classrooms that would love to become teachers, and often sometimes do a better.
Obama's fault. Obama did it. You better get after that guy.
So.
He's fucking out of control. He's coming to get you from the backside.
Okay, so here we are. Interesting. Yeah. So the whole idea behind this bill was to invigorate the teaching profession, and I think it will do that. The other bill that I worked very hard on was the school siding bill, and it was originally numbered 1017. It went through the whole process, passed through both houses, went to the governor, and he decided he liked all of it except for the part that actually would have helped school districts on the east side of the state. So, big surprise there. But so we came back with another bill, 2243, was the same bill basically, except it required a report on how we did at the end of that. And that passed 81-15 in the House and 31-17 in the Senate. And that was encouraging. For a governor that constantly talks about one Washington, he must think one Washington ends at the Cascades, unfortunately. So in 2018, just real quickly, I'll be focusing on mostly early learning issues. We have a state agency called the Department of Early Learning that has now been given more power by trying to merge it with the Children's Administration and Juvenile Justice. That, and the Department of Early Learning is the smallest part of that. They'll be given all the power to tell what those two other bureaucracies have to do. Unfortunately, if you want a good allegory, that's like a tick trying to direct a Great Dane in reality. I mean, they just don't, they're having problems within their own bureaucracy dealing with the licensing of daycares. And we have seen so many private child care businesses go out of business just because of the fact they're private. We're seeing a different type of licensing dealing with the ones that are tied in with everything the Department of Early Learning wants, and the ones that are picking and choosing based on what's best for their kids. And we really need to make sure they should be able to do that. So I'm going to hand the microphone off to the next person here, and thanks for the opportunity to give you a short summarization.
Anyway, I'm just going to talk briefly about the budget. the Hearst decision, some activities of the Senate Law and Justice Committee, which I chair, and then turn it over to Matt. And I'd like to say, first of all, it's been great working with both Matt and Bob. I think I know we have the only district where all three Republicans voted against the budget. And the reason I voted against it was it's a 13.5% increase in spending. And I always tell people our city of the Spokane Valley is debating whether to go to 1.5%, or at the most 2%. So I mean, what a difference! It's unsustainable, and when it continues to grow that high, it's just going to be more pressure for income taxes and other taxes. Plus, there were some minor taxes that were enacted to pass this budget, and some property taxes were increased and then lowered. Of course, the way government works, the increase happens first, and then the lowering is later. And the governor has already said he'd like to get rid of the lowering if the Democrats get control of the legislature. So you can see where he's heading. But it did pass, but some of the few positive things, a lot of them got sidetracked. One of the things was a reduction in the B&O tax for small manufacturers, so there would be equal to the B&O tax rate for Boeing. And that was agreed upon by the budget negotiators and by the governor's associates. And yet the governor vetoed that section out, which again shows that he's not a person of integrity. He doesn't keep his word. And as a result, there's no real confidence in him. And this is, I think, true for both parties. So on the Hearst decision, as you know, it was a 6-3 decision by the Supreme Court. Justice Stevens, in her dissent, indicated that it lacked all common sense. It avoided the precedent, and it was not a clear reading of the statute. So the position that the Senate Republicans and the House Republicans have taken to protect private property rights is the same position that the Department of Ecology had in that case. And on the other side was Fuse, the extreme environmentalists, on that. So as a result, they've kind of shut down the opportunity for individuals to build in rural areas that need wells. And so the Senate said, we are not going to pass a capital budget, which is $4 billion of spending, unless there is a permanent fix to the Hearst decision. And on top of that, we're not going to pass a capital budget until the governor first signs the bill that's the permanent fix to the Hearst decision, because the governor's word isn't any good. We want to see it signed first. And we held out, and I know Matt and Bob can talk about this. The votes, the Senate passed a permanent fix, I think, 3 or 4 times, and at the end of the third special session, the votes were there in the House to also pass the same permanent fix with some slight changes that would have been acceptable. And the House Democratic leadership refused to come out on the floor of the House. They stayed in caucus so they wouldn't have to vote on a vote they'd lose, and they wanted to give the Indian tribes veto authority over any project. So we're going to continue to hold tough. I think the Democrats are waiting to see about election results. There is a Republican seat in play over in the Redmond area that, if it flipped, would give the Democrats control of the Senate. However, on the capital budget, it still requires 60% vote on the bonds. So we still have leverage on that, and we're going to continue to, hang tough. I mean, to me, it seems that individuals that own private property rights and want to build and do something shouldn't have less rights than government, who's taking that money from those same taxpayers to spend for the capital budget. So that's one thing I'm happy our caucus has stood together. In addition, our committee was the only committee in the legislature that had a hearing on the abuses going on at Evergreen State College that you might have heard about. And basically, you had a Bernie Sanders professor of evolutionary biology who was basically told because he was white, he needed to get off the campus and not be there for this Day of Atonement or whatever that they had on campus. And they basically somewhat have disarmed the Evergreen police force. They're the only one in the state that does not have rifles issued to them, so if they ever had an active shooter on campus, they'd be sitting ducks. And it's just out of control. The school is being run by a small group of radical students. They've actually put out a manual called the Manual of Disorientation, and it's basically an anarchist manual. So this is school, and what did the governor do? Oh, he said, I'm monitoring the situation. They spent $250,000 on extra security, had to move the graduation to Tacoma. They had the State Patrol out in full riot gear on the campus. I mean, it's a real sad state of affairs. I'm sure there's some students here trying to, get an education, but I can tell you this, their enrollment's going to be down next year and continue to go down. Senator Baumgartner has proposed shutting it down, turning it into a military academy. So, any event, there's other things. I don't want to go too long. One final thing I'll talk about. Our committee last year did a historic investigation, Department of Corrections, the release of 3,000 prisoners, at least 2 deaths related on that. And then this year we had a hearing to see what the Department of Corrections had done. We had made recommendations, and so had the governor's investigators made recommendations, and obviously some are different. Well, they had implemented maybe half of the recommendations, and so we're going to continue to follow up on that. We had a reform bill that was all agreed upon with the House and Senate until the last minute, and the governor went to the Speaker of the House, and the bill got pulled and never came up on the House floor. And this would have protected whistleblowers. We had a whistleblower who complained about improper spending of money in the Department of Corrections, and eventually reached a settlement with the department, but part of the settlement that they put in was that she could never work for the state again. So you think of what message that sends to any other whistleblower, and so they have kind of a climate of fear there. Any event, we're going to continue to work on things on criminal justice, try to protect your property rights, try to protect you against property crime, which is very strong. We worked very closely with Larry Haskell, and he's been very helpful on a lot of legislation. So with that, if any of you ever need to contact us, we have an office here. All 3 of us are very much available, and I'm going to turn it over to the chair of the House Republican Caucus, Representative Shea.
So I want to start with something. I normally don't start off talking about this stuff, but it's about leadership. You have to understand, 8 years ago, our local electeds were at each other's throats all over the place on the board. We're not consistent in voting. And now, coming back from Olympia, we are working together. We are unified. We do have plans going forward that are working. And it's in great part to the leadership of Mike and Bob that has occurred, that we have been able to unify in that way. And you have to understand that the rest of the state is not that well represented. I mean, we have the head of the Judiciary Committee for the Senate. You've got the head of the Ways and Means Committee. You've got one of the leads in education. You've got one of the leads in public safety, and other people in leadership. It's amazing. So keep that in mind, that there's been a lot that has been positive that maybe has gone under the radar, and some people would want us to still be divided in our local political party, and we just got to resist that. We just got to resist it, because we're working and we're turning the direction of the state more conservative. So I wanted to start with that tonight. So I want to tell a story this morning. So the sewer line at our law office broke. There's probably a commentary in there about lawyers being full of something, but I came there this morning and I was walking past it and there's a guy sitting in a tractor and I looked over at him and I said, "How's it going?" He said, "Well, we fixed the line. We're just waiting on the inspector." And so for half a day, everybody in the building literally had to wait for permission from the government to go to the bathroom. For real. Now I want you to think about that for a second, because that really sums up the session. We had more bureaucracy, we had more spending, and unfortunately we're heading down the road of more taxes. And Mike's right. I mean, the increased spending is incredible, but 30% over the next 4 years increase in spending. Now, if you look at the education testing results, and then you look at the spending, there is no correlation. And I think we just got to come to the realization that throwing more money at something isn't necessarily the right thing. I want to talk on the positive side now. A lot of good things happened this session, and a couple of them I'll bring to your attention. One of them is this. So throughout all of government, there is something called interagency agreements. And bureaucrats will sign these agreements, and it could be an interagency agreement from, let's say, the Department of Ecology to the Environmental Protection Agency or to local governments or to tribes. And we don't know what all of those agreements say. And they have fiscal implications and they have policy implications. Department of Ecology had has 4,000 of these agreements. So we all worked together this year and we got passed a bill that makes them put every single agreement online so we can take a look at that. And we're not going to stop with Department of Ecology. We're just trying to get our foot in the door, right? We're going to continue with every government agency because I think that's the right thing to do. Second thing, probably really encouraging to me at least, for the first time in 80 years, we legalized industrial hemp officially. House Bill 2064, and the governor signed that into law. So that was awesome. And already growing hemp in Moses Lake, Washington, a lot of farmers are now looking to diversify their crops so that hemp, I don't know if you know that, it remediates the soil. It's actually good for the soil. So we can have another crop besides just wheat and potatoes and stuff. We can be number one in hemp once again. And we were. 80 years ago, Washington was one of the largest exporters in the whole world. Why not be it again? All right, I want to mention one other thing that's great from the pro-gun side. We've been working on this for 3 years. Representative Dave Taylor kind of took the lead this year, but actually getting a notice when your concealed carry permit is about to expire. Finally. And the governor signed that into law. And it's kind of funny too, and I always like it when we come around the table, the governor is always kind of shocked to see us there getting a bill signed. And it's almost like he wants to read it again, right? But he doesn't want to be rude, you know. So, but we got that through as well. I want to end by mentioning, I would be remiss if I didn't mention this. We have been working very, very well with the city of Spokane Valley. We have money in the transportation budget for some projects like the Pines Road underpass and the Barker Road overpass, over the railroad tracks, and to move those projects forward. Why is that important? Because that industrial park we have out there is the largest industrial park between Seattle and Minneapolis. And businesses they want to come if we have the infrastructure. So the city of Spokane Valley has been doing a great job, and I really want to take just a moment and honor them tonight. So if you're here, could you stand up and let's give them a round of applause? Yeah. And by the way, a model for all the cities in the western United States, because they don't have debt. I want to say that again. They don't have debt. They aren't raising taxes, and they're limiting growth to below 2%. I mean, that's amazing. Name a city. I don't even remember the last time I heard about that. Anyway, well, I want to thank you again for having us tonight, and I don't know if we have time to take questions or not, but if we do, I guess we can go into taking some questions, because I want to see what's on your heart tonight. So, yeah, let's take one of them out.
So wait for the response, or else repeat the justification.
Well, this isn't really a question, but it's sort of a report from the front lines. I'm a nurse at Deaconess Hospital, and I'm an ICU nurse, but occasionally we have to float down to the emergency department to sit with mentally ill patients who are being warehoused in our emergency room. And it is It is tragic. I was sitting with a man who had been deemed a danger to himself. He was suicidal when he first came in. He was sitting in our emergency room for more than 11 days because there was no proper place for him to go to get the mental health treatment he needed. And I don't know what the answer is. And he was one of 6 patients in Deaconess ER that day. And the cost of having an RN sitting to make sure, watching him to make sure that that person did not kill himself, times 8 patients, it's costly, and they're not getting the treatment that they need and that they deserve. And I know that the people of Washington, it's just not a good situation. Something needs to happen. I don't know what the answer is, but something needs to happen. So, thank you.
This is just an observation rather than a question. Briefly, I happen to be a season ticket holder for the Spokane Indians. Several of us about 2 months ago approached the general manager and told him it was rather inappropriate to stand at the national anthem to put your hands behind your back. He said he was unaware of the fact that you're supposed to put your hand over your chest. He continues to this day to stand with his hands behind his back along with 3 of his other minions or assistant managers. Anyway, he continues to go ahead and stand with his hands behind his back with several of his assistant managers during the playing of the national anthem. Anyways, for what it's worth, I just wanted to point that out. It's amazing, though, a general manager of a baseball game claims he doesn't know that it's inappropriate to not put your hand on your chest. Thank you.
Gary, go for it.
Can you answer, or is it even known, how much of these large increases in spending are directly attributed to judicial decisions in the state? And can that be shown on the legislation? Judge so-and-so did this and it's costing the taxpayers such and such. Can that be done?
So I don't know if you noticed, one other bill that we got passed was to put the gas tax breakout on the gas pumps. You guys see that? Maybe we should do that with bills and judicial numbers. Maybe that's the idea. I love it. Why not? Why not call them out for it? And even if it doesn't go anywhere, it's transparency and it brings the message home.
One more question there.
My question is regarding the marijuana being sold. Has the state actually seen revenue coming in from this, or is it being offset by other costs that we're losing in alcohol sales, or just other revenue that we're spending on mental illness? Has there been a study on this?
Well, now there is money coming in on that, and that has been used for a number of things. Some going back a small amount to cities and counties, and some being used to balance the budget, which is grown so much. But there's a lot of marijuana being sold. The marijuana over on Trent in Millwood is the highest per capita in the state on the amount of marijuana. And I don't know if you guys have any other comments on that.
You see, that's not just the smoke from the paper mill. Is that what you just said, John? No, it's in the hundreds of millions. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the revenue coming out of. You can go online actually, and it shows the monthly revenue. And individual shops will be grossing $250,000, and that's a small shop. Larger shop, $750,000. So per shop. So there's a lot, and there is revenue being generated. And understand something though, if that revenue is being generated and government bureaucrats get addicted to it. Hope you follow the analogy, right?
Cost in law enforcement, emergency rooms. Are we seeing has it been a negative or positive overall income to the state based on other factors that's affecting?
Yeah, a lot of it. I do know this, that the amount of driving under the influence of marijuana cases have gone up significantly in the city of the Spokane Valley. They're keeping stats on that. And our overall DUIs based on alcohol have been going down because of enforcement and other issues, laws that we've passed. But marijuana and then the alcohol-drug combination DUIs are going up. And there was some, I know we had a place there right at, I think, about 3rd and Bowdish, right near the Jackson Hole Tavern. And it fortunately closed, in my mind, but we were getting a number of marijuana DUIs, patrons coming out of that location. So yeah, there is a real cost to it, and you know, Colorado's had some concerns. So we'll see what happens, but it's in my mind certainly not all a positive thing.
Just one thing. In the Central Valley School District alone, there's been a 40% increase in kids being either caught with substance or under the influence of. So
and this is where the problem, I think, comes in. It is generating a lot of money, and so government bureaucracies are going to be dependent on that money. So the idea that it's going to go away is probably not viable. What I would tell you is, and I think it's to our great dismay, there are tremendous medical uses for cannabis and for non-psychoactive parts of cannabis like CBD. Those are very well documented. There's hundreds of studies on that. And it seems like the medical market right now is completely crushed and going away because of the recreational market. I think we need to restore balance and get that under control, because that's the biggest thing that I'm seeing happen. And you know, the whole reason this was voted in was supposed to be access to medicine, and yet that's not always happening in a lot of cases. So that's going to bring up a whole bunch of other questions. Rob? Yeah.
Say that the county exclusive of the cities is getting about $35,000 a month.
Okay. Yes.
Right here. Just a minute. We got somebody?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just reading an article, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it was on crime in Spokane, and the high rate of crime. This article was, and I can't cite that article right now, stating that it's because we get so many pre-release in the category going into pre-release, and then prisoners are released into our community. Do you know if there's any fact to that? And also, if it is the case, I'm wondering, is somebody getting paid, you know, to do it this way, to bring them here pre-release and release?
Well, there is on the state system and the Department of Corrections, there is, on most of them, they have supervision when they get out. There's a real question about how well that supervision has worked or not worked. If you talk to law enforcement or talk to prosecutors, they question very much whether the supervision is proper. On pre-release, when a judge looks at what to do and whether they're going to set bail or not, the main factor in most of the cases, whether the person is going to show up in court, because these are people that have not been convicted yet of anything. So they've been charged, and they need to keep their court dates. And if they have not shown up in the past in court, or been or considered a flight risk, they're not from the area, whatever, then those are all factors taken into account into bail. And on real serious cases, they also take into account public safety. But those are decisions made on a case-by-case basis. So I think it's kind of hard to say on the pre-release what's happening on the supervision after they get out. I think there's a lot that can be done. And our committee, the Senate Law and Justice Committee, is going to be having a hearing here in the Spokane Valley on October 24th at the new City Hall Council Chambers, and that'll be one of the issues we're going to discuss is the supervision.
I want to add too, though, I mean, the 3rd legislative district, which is predominantly in Spokane, right, is still one of the poorest districts in the state, if not the poorest district in the state. And the policies of driving businesses out of the city of Spokane is not improving that situation in any way, shape, or form. And poverty has a true, direct, demonstrable correlation to crime. It just does. So the anti-business policies of the city of Spokane, I think we need to examine those and how those are affecting crime rates down there as well.
Thanks very much.
One more. Yeah.
I have a concern about the pain meds, and I guess opiates is the main thing, but I'm just an NAC, not a nurse or a doctor, but I do in-home care, and a lot of my clients have pain, and so when I hear they're getting really strict with opiates, so I'm on the side of the patient and the doctors. So, and that may be more on a federal level, but I'm concerned that the people that need pain meds can still get them, and the doctors aren't automatically in deep doo-doo for, trying to give that out. But I don't know the whole story, but I am very concerned about that maybe there's even a better kind of pain medicine of some kind, maybe even natural stuff, I don't know, but so I'm just throwing that out. That's a real concern.
Yeah, thank you very much. That is something that the legislature has been looking into, and there's been a number of things, and they're trying, of course, to get some of the amounts of the prescriptions to be less, and not have a lot of that going around, and look at, do they really need to prescribe as much in the type of pain medication as they are. But I think we're going to conclude at this point, and Matt did want to say something about an effort that he's been very involved with, and I was involved with a number of years ago with this gentleman's father. So go ahead, Matt.
Well, and we're always involved together on this, but we'd be remiss if we didn't mention Liberty State. And there have been a lot of things out there. It's kind of funny, but I want to give you some facts, okay? First of all, Eastern Washington, the counties that would be part of that proposed state, generate, and this is non-gas tax, generate about $3 billion, far more than enough to run a government for those that say that it would be impossible. Second, 10,000 people weighed in on this with 74% support. So I don't care what the media says, it is wildly popular. And last, it has allowed us over in Olympia to have the conversation about the mistreatment of rural Washington. And we have made more ground up this year, especially thanks to Bob's efforts on Growth Management Act and school siting than we have in the last decade. So it's working, and love to have your support. Make sure you go to patriotpolls.org, patriotpolls.org, and vote on the flag design, because we're going to start flying those around here too to be annoying. All right.
Oh, thank you both so much. Claire? Rusty, I think you had a comment you wanted to make for open mic. You want to come up here? Yeah. Right between the lines.
Does this work? Yep. Okay.
Okay, hold it there.
Okay. Oh, okay. I was fortunate to watch a lot of our President Trump's rallies during the campaign, which were very awesome. One of the things that he brought up over and over and over was the fact that our system is rigged. And there's a movement currently going that's underway. A gentleman named Robert David Steele and former Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney are actually in an RV going around the country to rally support and fix the system. You can go to this website right here and learn more about it. You can watch them on YouTube. Just put Robert David Steele or Cynthia McKinney, and there's so many good things to hear of what they're doing. And basically they're saying that we can't move forward on a lot of things until we have reformed our elections. And they have what's called the Election Reform Act of 2017, and this is an important thing. So thank you very much. What's that? Oh, first time I've ever done this. So.
Okay.
Here you go.
Okay, hang on. You're not up yet. Oh, thank you. Okay, we got lots of microphones. Okay, I think we're going to bring up the Spokane Valley. Rod, I think you wanted to say a word, or was it Ed? Okay, come on up. It's just the pace man, huh?
Rod's got his mouth full, so we'll let him eat.
In front of the mic.
And if I miss something, I'll ask Rod to get up and fill in what I missed. So, City of Spokane Valley, as Matt Shea said, City of Spokane Valley is doing great. Our new city hall is on schedule, on budget. It's going to save about $7 million over the 30 years of the mortgage. The mortgage payments at the beginning are $34,000 a year less than our current rent payments. It's a good deal for the city. We're hoping that it will, and one of the reasons we put it where it is, we're hoping that it will help stimulate the redevelopment of the U City area. So that's a good thing. Money-wise, as you've heard before, our credit rating, our city's credit rating has been upgraded twice in 2 years. The thing about keeping the budgets flat, we asked the city manager to grow the budget by no more than 1%. And previous city manager said, oh, no way, we can't do that because the inflation rate is 3%. And so the history is the budget had been growing by 3% a year. Our new city manager said, okay. And he worked with his staff, and they made it happen. And so we had a 1% growth from 2016 to 2017. We keep 50% cash reserves, and because of sales tax income is so good, and we hold spending down, we're sitting on a few $1 million of surplus that we're going to invest back into capital projects that will further stimulate economic development. And because this is an election time, I can't resist saying a few words about the campaign. I just want to point out that some of the things I'm really proud of in my 4 years on the city council, I voted no on a proposed ordinance that would have prevented the parking of trucks and big trucks and RVs on city streets. They're your streets. You have the right to use them. You have the right to park on them. I voted no. That ordinance would have also affected all commercial vehicles parked on private property even. I wrote and sponsored our city's resolution that said we are not a sanctuary city, and we passed it in 2016. I co-sponsored a resolution that we used as the basis for lobbying with the state legislature that we do not like the bathroom rule. We want normal women to be able to enjoy privacy in restrooms and locker rooms and such. And Matt Shea mentioned the 51st state and how important that was. I put that on our city's agenda, asking that when the time is right, the time's not right yet, but when the time is right, that we pass a resolution saying that we support the 51st state. I'm proud of all that. The clique of bitterness, of course, doesn't like those things, and you'll be hearing more about it in the campaign against me. I also want to point out that the city council now is really a team. We do not all agree on everything. We are not in lockstep, and we don't always vote together, but we've got a 7-person team on the city council that's working well for you, and we represent you. For example, we had a grant and a plan to build a sidewalk along Blake. The people that live there said they did not want it, and so we turned back the money. We didn't do it. And so the clique of bitterness now is spinning that up in 2 ways. They're saying, number one, we don't really represent the citizens. Now, if that isn't a crock of horse manure, I don't know what. And number 2, they're saying, how dare you turn back federal money, the almighty federal dollar? Well, we're going to do it if that's what the people want. So we're a good team. 5 of us are up for re-election, and I'm asking you, please, we're the Liberty Constitution conservatives. We've got a bunch of progressives, 5 progressives running against us. One of them is a donkey wearing an elephant suit, but it'll be unzipped sooner or later. Don't do that. So please help re-elect Rod Higgins, Ed Pace, that's me, and retain Caleb Collier, Pam Haley, and Mike Munch. Thank you. Rod, do you want to?
Oh, he's coming up.
If I said anything wrong, he'll straighten me out.
Fat chance.
Very briefly, one of the things that when our legislators were up here talking, they were talking about how they work in unison. Well, you should be aware that they work in unison with our city council as well. We work very closely with them to the extent that our rail crossings at Barker and Pines are going to happen in no small part with their support. Okay? Just wanted you to know that. One other thing, the City Hall has been Taj Mahal, a monument to our whatever. The number that Ed gave, about $7 million, was with a 2.5% increase in rent if we stayed in the same place. We would save that over the 30 years. Actually, if you made the assumption that the state PERS system, the retirement system, at say 7.5%, wow. Extend that number out for 30 years. We did the right thing, and I'm damn proud of it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see where we're going. Okay, these are all the people that are running for office. I'm running right through those. Okay, here we go. We're going to get to tonight's presentation and the introduction. Okay, I don't really have an introduction. I spent like, God, how many hours? 10 hours together? This guy's good. He is really good, so I'm anxious to hear the presentation. I requested an executive summary from him, which he was gratefully provided and put together, and that's been on the email, so hopefully you can. Okay, let's just move on. Okay, so anyway, what I would like to do is I'd like to introduce you to G.R. Mobley, and he will tell you more about himself as the presentation progresses. Big hand.
So I repeat myself when under stress. I repeat myself when under stress. So we're good. We're working. And I don't see what I need to see. There's something I need to see up there. Is this right?
That's right, there's your clicker.
This is my clicker.
Oh, that's right, your clicker.
Before I really get started into this meaty presentation, I wanted to, and it is meaty, and I'm going to really breeze through this as fast as I possibly can, but I wanted to thank the Northwest Grassroots for having me and giving me an opportunity to really fire hose a lot of people tonight. I do have my books here, and the majority of the proceeds of the sale of the book will actually go to the Northwest Grassroots. So I'm not really going to make that much money on it. I don't like doing book tours and peddling, and as a matter of fact, when I do things like this, I always give the proceeds to the host organization because I know that they're sitting there and I'm just going to be making them sick by, going through the Constitution and how bad it really is. Secondly, or thirdly, I do have a radio show in Spokane. It's on AM 1230, and I'm right now during your evening commute from 4 to 5 on Wednesdays, and hopefully we'll be growing that into Tuesdays and Thursdays as well within the next few months with sponsorship support and so forth. So without any further ado, what I have here is the irrefutable argument for Republic Review. Republic Review is a term that I came up with another constitutional scholar that is a play on judicial review because the Supreme Court says that they want to have the power to be able to pull in throughout the Republic a case that they think that might be worthy of their view, even though it's outside of the constitutional jurisdiction. But Republic Review actually is an inherent right, and we are a republic, and the republic has the authority, and I will get into this, in actually overseeing the Constitution. So, let me turn myself on, and here we go. So I have some fundamental premises. Reasonable people, equally informed, seldom disagree. The problem is that middle part, equally informed. We have a lot of people that don't necessarily have the same level of information. The second premise is knowledge is power. I think everybody understands, and as soon as you start understanding what you need to be doing, then you become a little more powerful, and knowledge is also dangerous. And so the third part of this is that, and this is basically a phrase from Madison, and I think it was common knowledge back in the framers' days, the people are the fountain of political power. And so tying these three things together, becoming equally informed and becoming knowledgeable in the right ways of truly understanding the actual academic applications of the Constitution and getting back into what the framers gave us will help us concentrate our power as the fountain of power, because the people are the fountain of power. And the problem with our representation, if any of them are still left that are back in DC or back, not in DC, back in Olympia and DC, if Kathy was here, is that we redirect them in so many different ways. So I want to go through this, and I want you to keep this in mind, that there are so many distractions that are causing our problems, that we're not focused and succinct in the message that we want our representatives to save us from federal tyranny. So if you didn't know, the Constitution was written for and by the states. It didn't just come up from the Potomac, and it didn't just come from a good rainfall out in a field. The states sent delegates, and the states had to ratify this. And so one of the unique things about our Constitution is that the sovereignty was actually evenly distributed. The majority of the power obviously rests with the people, but the states are really the overseers, and we're the ones that are supposed to be controlling the states. So if you can grasp that, then Article 7 should make sense if you know what Article 7 is. It's the ratification process. Article 7 identifies who the stakeholders are of the Constitution. Who was it? It was the states. And the 13 original states are the real stakeholders, and all states that came in basically became equal stakeholders in that same Constitution. So Washington is a part of the stakeholders and owners of this Constitution. It's not the federal government, it's not the Supreme Court. They are the highest authority and sovereigns in the world over the world's greatest government. Do you fathom that? I hope so. So if you understand this ratification clause, which is a part of Article 7, Ratification is the official and formal acceptance of a contract. Basically, it's pointing out that this Constitution is a contract. Madison said this. Jefferson said this. All the framers interchanged compact, constitution, and contract. They were interchangeable several times. In many of their writings, they referred to it as compacts and contracts. That being said, the ratification process didn't just happen in a bubble, nor was it an up and down vote where everybody just voted, yeah, we're going to accept this. Guess what? In contract law, if you understand what happens when you're negotiating a contract, the negotiations of that contract actually become legally binding. If you understand that I say that this line means this, and you, sir, have given me this contract that you've written, and you say, no, this is exactly what it means, and you write that down, that's legally binding to what that contract means. And that's exactly what happened during these ratification debates. But I'll get into that a little sooner. But what the Constitution actually did do in these two things, these two bullets here at the very bottom, is it delegated very specific powers to the federal government. This is all they can do, nothing more. This is what we delegate to you to do. That second one, that second bullet, is what basically the states have retained, basically giving them supremacy on all things not delegated. Healthcare, not delegated. The states are supreme in that. Everything that we really understand that the federal government is doing, over 80%, as I say in my executive summary, is unconstitutional. These are the delegated powers. I think it's really important I put them up here. We're just going to fly through these. I'm not going to read these. And at the very bottom, you'll notice the blue words will denote the commonly used usurpations that the federal government uses, or as far as the clauses, Commerce Clause, General Welfare Clause, Necessary and Proper Clause, and the Supremacy Clause. Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I was going to say this at the very end, that all of these slides I'm putting up will be in PDF format on my website, and if Northwest Grassroots has a website as well, but I have reclaimingtherepublic.org and mobiusstrippress.org. They'll all point to the where you can get these. And if you follow me on Facebook, I'll announce it as soon as I get these things up. So that way you can actually go through this and garner more, because I'm not reading these for you. And I don't have the time, because I understand opportunity costs, and I really appreciate you being here. So this is page 1 of the delegated powers. This is Article 1, Section 8. Here's page 2 of the delegated powers. Oversight is an inherent vehicle in a contract. If you have a subcontractor that is failing to execute as you've told them, and they've taken privileges or latitude in the contract, you have the power to go in and say, we did not give you this, or delegate these powers to you, and you can actually kick them out, or you can get them back into the framework if they want to behave well. That's the power the states have. And in the ratification, as I said this before, the mediations, negotiations, and everything that they clarified are legally binding. So here's why John Marshall did not want to have these things as a part of their standard. He never cited the ratification debates. Why? Because he knew it was said, because he was at the Virginia ratification debate, and it would have tied his hands to saying, well, I guess the federal government isn't supreme in these particular cases or in all things, as he did later, and I'll get into that. So therefore, the states are the principal stakeholders of the Constitution, and they have the ability to actually step in at any point in time, because it is inherent of oversight and control in any contract. If you are the stakeholder, you can step in at any point and take over. So the modification process is another thing that supports this. Who has the power to make any changes to the Constitution? Can the Supreme Court come along and say, we want to grant the ability to give abortions? No, they can't. It's well outside their jurisdiction. They don't have the power to make those changes, but they do it because we've been told that they can. Marshall created these precedents a long time ago, but the Article 5 process clearly states who is the arbiter, or I should say, who is the final arbiter of what becomes constitutional, what isn't constitutional. It's the states. It requires 3/4 of the states to allow something to be changed to the Constitution. Not the President, not Congress, nor the Supreme Court. The states have that kind of power. So if we move forward real quick, and I set up these facts of precedence, if you look at what the federal government did right out the gate, right after the Constitution was signed, they set up a precedence of obeying the Constitution. Imagine that. They actually lived by it because they amended the Constitution 12 times while the framers were still alive. And as a matter of fact, if you look at this 12th Amendment, the 12th Amendment, or I'm sorry, is it the 12th? Yeah, it's the 12th Amendment because that was the Jefferson-Adams debate over the Electoral College because it took 80 votes to finally get the president seated to be Jefferson. And so they changed the Electoral College. So they made a minute change to Article 2 and they amended the Constitution for that. Guess what? We're not even following that because Congress took it upon themselves to say we can create statutes and regulations now and change how we do our Electoral College. That's why we're not doing it per Article 11, or I should say, per the 12th Amendment. So let me give you a little pitch on our federal government. If everybody doesn't know, the president is the executive, and he's supposed to faithfully execute the laws, not create laws, execute. He has the biggest stake in foreign policy, and to me, that's one of the most important things is what is his foreign policies. Congress is supposed to legislate and create the laws that are pertinent to the enumerated powers, not create new powers. And the best part is the Supreme Court is supposed to be the guardians. They're supposed to protect the Constitution from encroachments from the legislation or encroachments from the executive. And if you read the Federalist Papers, one would think that these guys were holy men, that they would have been holy men, but they're not, and they're obviously very corruptible. Bottom line, the states have, and it's incredible that the states have this ability, and as I say it down here at the very bottom, this contractual authority that the states possess cannot be usurped, delegated, or abdicated voluntarily or by force. It has to be changed per the Constitution and the constitutional process, and the states are asleep at the wheel. So the Constitution's been under attack for a long time, and in 1803 was the first time by the judiciary with judicial review. The first time by Congress that was really egregious was 1817 with, no, it was 1817 with Madison, I'm sorry. I've just got all these other numbers. 1849 was the year that they actually successfully created an unconstitutional department called the Department of Interior, which is the BLM. We got a problem with those guys? Okay, so that is an unconstitutional department. And in 1829 was the first time the president really stepped over his bounds and actually persecuted people, such as the Trail of Tears. This was Andrew Jackson when he actually started reigning with some tyranny. He got some things right, but he was our first living king, overstepping his bounds, and we've had nothing but kings since. So the judiciary has used these 4 clauses to usurp the state's powers. And if you go through the language of the Constitution, the language of the Federalist Papers, the Constitutional Convention, ratification debates, and so forth, it does not jive with what John Marshall said. The 4 clauses, in actuality, really, and as a matter of fact, let me jump to this Commerce Clause, which is the 3rd one down. There's this thing called regulate, and people read in the commerce, what, they're supposed to regulate commerce? No. Back then, the definition of regulate meant put in good order. That was the common use, and as a matter of fact, they didn't have heavy regulations and heavy-handed tactics of government. If you look, they were a laissez-faire, not involved at all unless there was a direct dispute between one state or another, or in contracts and so forth. As far as the necessary and proper clause and all of these other ones, there's a real good document I'm going to get to real quick here. But these are the 7 landmark cases. I believe it's 7 up there, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 7. I know that a few people point to 8 and 9. But these to me are the real 7 landmark cases that John Marshall used to create rulings that what he ended up doing was created unconstitutional footings for people to come in later because he injected precedents in case law. The Constitution does not allocate precedents and case law. Do you understand that? So in other words, because this happened or somebody said something, we believe we can make a decision in favor of doing this. No, it's either in the Constitution or not, and that's how they're supposed to read it. There's no case law allowed in the Constitution. And then if you read the ratification debates, they were very clear. Had that been a part of the Constitutional Convention and the ratification debates, I'm telling you, the 13 states would have rejected it because they would have recognized that the judiciary would have had way too much power to be able to start moving decisions and amending the Constitution or making things constitutional. So in 1817, this is a very interesting story. Madison was just getting out of his presidency. He had a conversation sometime in late January, early February, with his colleagues from Congress, because he worked in Congress for a long time. And they wanted to know what they could do to create a hallmark bill that would, just make his legislation, right? Like Obamacare, his legislation. And so he said, the one thing that this nation really needs is the ability to move commerce from the hinterland to the ports and back and forth. And if we could move commerce more efficiently, that we would be an economic power that no one in the world could reckon with. And he was absolutely correct. They went across the aisle, or they went down, Pennsylvania's Avenue, and they created their legislation. They came back with what was called the bonus bill. And this bonus bill was vetoed by Madison. And they were really insulted by this fact. And you know what the Madison Monument is in Washington? The Library of Congress. That's the edifice for the guy we call the father of the Constitution, because obviously they were a little upset. But the fact is that if you read this one veto, and I say it right here, this is likely the most powerful one-page document written since the dawn and since now to this day for this republic, because he squashes these 4 clauses in this one veto. He basically says that the Supremacy Clause, the Commerce Clause, the Necessary and Proper Clause, and the General Welfare and Defense Clauses only pertain to the enumerated powers within the Constitution. These are not portals to granting new powers. This is Madison saying this. And so I invite you to read this if you haven't read my executive summary and all the citations. This is in my first book as well. So bottom line, they weren't supposed to do this. Well, they tried again in 1822 with James Monroe, and then they tried again in 1830 with Andrew Jackson. And both of those presidents vetoed what was going to be the Department of Transportation. All 3 said you have to amend the Constitution if you want to have a Department of Transportation. Well, seems to me, folks, we've got one. Please show me the amendment. We have 2 framers and a Johnny-come-lately President Jackson, but still, we got the precedents, and they said that we had to do this. So who's right? Who has the accuracy on this? Who's nadir on this point, right above the accuracy on this? And I'm going to tell you, it's Madison, because he knew. So if you remember that government picture that I had before, those top lists up there, if you look, interior, agriculture, those are all unconstitutional powers that were created via these clauses. Interesting. None of them have gone through the Article 5 process. And as a matter of fact, if you notice, there's a little blue box above the form of government. That is supposed to be the state's oversight to make sure that nothing gets created to weigh upon the republic. It has to be done within the confines of the Constitution, which is that kind of beige area that I have the Constitution barrier. So for them to create anything, it has to be within the Constitution, and they didn't do that. So in a macro, we have 15 executive departments, 585 agencies, offices, blah, 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 blah. Over 80% of them are unconstitutional. Now, I don't know if that's arbitrary, but to me, that definitely qualifies as federal tyranny. We didn't grant them these powers through the constitutional process. So the problem is really not about immigration. The problem isn't about abortion and all of these other education. You name it, you call it what you want if it's your passion. But I'm telling you, the problem is truly compliance to the Constitution. all of these problems that everybody's passionate about. Remember I was talking about that fountain of power. There's so many people that are caught up on whatever their passion of the day is or the problem du jour. The problem du jour should be one thing and one thing alone, compliance with the Constitution. That's it. If we focus on that, all these other problems are going to go away. And this is our monster, and there's the focus. If we start focusing on the monster instead of these little arms, because they've truly created a Leviathan. So I think this is a great picture to kind of show all the different arms that they've grown that have been unconstitutional. If any of those are up there that are your passion, then I would basically say, let's redirect your passion and focus down to what the real problem is, and that's the monster. If you want to get rid of these things, you have to kill the monster. So the Constitution is very clear. It gave the sole responsibility to the states. The framers knew exactly what they were doing. And again, it's not given to the president, and it's not given to Congress, and it's not given to the Supreme Court. So what do you do when a contract is being violated? And again, who's that ultimate authority that we can go to? There you go. It's an audit. It's a contract. It's inherent. We can audit the Constitution, that simple. As a matter of fact, I floated this out, and if you listen to my radio show today, I talked to Dr. Weil, who's the Dean of Honors for Middle Tennessee University, and he's the Dean of the Political Science Department. And he doesn't necessarily like my idea because he's an academic, and I have a lot of respect for this guy. He really understands the ins and outs and knows a lot more than me, but he doesn't argue the fact that the states don't have this power. He just would not want to see this because he believes that there would be an there'd be anarchy that might follow from this. Or there may be other problems, or there's precedents and so forth. But again, giving him the due respect of being an academic, I give him that. But there's lots of others that don't like this as well because they think, oh, we can't do this. We've got to educate everybody. So I'll get into how we do this, but this is what we really have to do. We must audit the Constitution, getting all the states involved, because we got to remember, it's our contract. So conducting an audit is one of those things that we can actually get down by going, or the basis of the audit is one of those things that we just basically have to follow the Constitution. Was the Constitution followed in creating any new roles, responsibilities, and powers? So we have to go through all of these existing roles, responsibilities, and powers and define that's constitutional, that's not constitutional. So here's the 12 executive departments that have been created since the framers created the first three, the Defense, Treasury, and State. So here's the other 12. Was the Article 5 process followed for them to have these delegated powers? Are these usurped? Well, you won't find any amendments, folks. So the key points to remember is Article 7 truly defined who the stakeholders were of the Constitution. It is in the Constitution who had to buy in. It had nothing to do with corporations or the federal government because it didn't exist. It required the states. Article 5 gives the states the power to dictate what is constitutional, what isn't. And because they passed these 12 departments under our nose and we've been sleeping at the wheel, I'm just here waking you up. I'm just here stating the obvious. We have the ability to challenge these as the Republic as we move forward. And so auditing the contract, again, is the obvious thing that we have to do. And it can start with one state. One. So eventually all states, once one state gets this going, all states are going to get into the game because they have skin in the game. And the audit is only an administrative function. So those of you who think that the exerting state power will lead to a very decimating thing to the Constitution, not at all. If you understand what an audit is to protect that document, protect the contract, right? And so when I talk about a convention for Republic review, I'm not talking about a convention that's going to amend, write, rewrite, make any modifications. It's basically an audit of looking at what the Constitution says and what you're doing and going, you're not supposed to be doing these things. You're going to have to cease and desist. These are going to have to come back to the states. And the states will be the sovereigns and decide what they want to do. If you want a Veterans Affair then we have to amend the Constitution. As a veteran, I would love to see that become constitutional, but it's unconstitutional, bottom line. So we have to strictly go against the norm of accepting what they're doing because they're supreme, and we have to start looking in the paradigm that we are the supremes over whatever is constitutional and what isn't. So when we get one state to initiate this audit and this convention process, what it does is it's going to establish authenticity and reestablish the authority that the states have in this Constitution. You get that? They're going to reestablish their authority once again because the federal government has basically taken the role that they are the supreme in all things. Read the Washington State Constitution. It says that the U.S. Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Then why is it that the state of Washington is following all these unconstitutional things that aren't in the U.S. Constitution? So when we get the first state, it's going to call upon all the other states. And as a matter of fact, folks, this has happened before. You know who did this the first time in trying to call an audit? Anybody read my executive summary? Madison and Jefferson with the Sedition Acts tried to stand up and called all the states to say this is a constitutional violation of the First Amendment. They cannot regulate speech. And that's exactly what they did with the Sedition Act. And so they sent out an appeal to all the states saying, please join us in admonishing and setting the federal government right. Well, the other states didn't want to play along. That wasn't their fault at this point. But we cannot afford not to sit on our hands anymore. And I'm telling you, there's more than enough states that when they get this and when they start cogitating, ruminating, and digesting this information, why is it that, they haven't started this sooner? The convention in auditing the Constitution is what I call Republic Review. It is pulling the Republic together and reviewing that document and ensuring that what's being performed and what's being done is within the purview of that document, period. I think it's a logical marketing concept, Republic Review. Again, it is not a constitutional convention. It is not a convention of states. These two terms, convention of states and or a constitutional convention, requires an Article 5 application of the states to Congress. The states don't need to apply when they want to enforce their contract. All they need to do is say, you know what, we're done. You're running us into the ditch on debt. You're doing all of these tyrannical things to us. You're taking our property. We're done. We're going to audit you. Prove to me today that you actually have the authority from our state to exercise the Department of Interior, to have any BLMs, ATFs, and all of these things, FBI. All of these things are outside the purview of the Constitution. So guess who's public enemy number one? The guy that's saying this. But if you all start focusing and join me in getting this out and becoming a part of the constitutional warrior that I'm hoping to make out of everybody, then when I get killed, because, believe me, if they find me cut up in the freezer, don't believe the suicide note, okay? So Republic Review is not any of these two types of conventions, just to make clear, because a lot of people, they see that C word, convention, and they go, oh, I don't know. That's bad. What is the definition of a convention? Does anybody know? It's a process. In engineering, there are conventions. There are processes of manufacturing. There's processes. That's what convention really means. Anyway, in conclusion, all of these slides, like I said at the very beginning, these are going to be available, as well as these videos and so forth. So this is round one of what we have to do. The second presentation, and both of these presentations I've never given to anybody, so this is all kind of new material. So forgive me if I've stumbled or if I've sprayed on you for getting too excited. But anyway, are there any questions? Do we want to have microphones? Okay. And while you ask questions, I'm going to prep up the next set of slides so we can do this efficiently.
Okay. Well, my question has to do with federal lands
Okay.
that are within the boundaries of the states. Isn't there some, let me see how to phrase this. My understanding is that, like, for example, Idaho, because Idaho entered the Union at a later date, the federal government still has jurisdiction over 70% of the land within the border of Idaho. Is that accurate, or would that be inaccurate?
Okay, so what you're saying is accurate because the federal government assumes, you know what happens when anybody assumes, but the federal government assumes that they still have the authority over actual sovereign states' property. Show me in the Constitution where they can retain any authority. As a matter of fact, it's in Article 1, Section 8, I think it's subsection 17, that dictates what the federal government can possess land for. And none of it is having to do with departments of forestry, EPA, whatever you want to do. It's literally for very limited scope things. For the seat of government, Washington, D.C., and it says it can only be 10 nautical miles by 10 nautical miles. Virginia took their part back, by the way. But they can have forts, they can have military training, they can have posts, like post offices. Those are the necessary and proper things that they need, but for them to possess forest of a sovereign state is unconstitutional. And the basis that they started making these things, these are all regulations and statutes, once again, that they've gone outside the scope of the Constitution, and they didn't go back to the states and say, hey, can we do this? No, they assumed their supremacy over these things. And they used John Marshall's precedences, and they built off of those unconstitutional footings to do all of that. Next question.
There's a movement to amend the Constitution to overturn the Citizens United case, Supreme Court case. So why is an amendment required for that? But was there an amendment that overturned Dred Scott?
No. And as a matter of fact, that's a completely different presentation, if you don't mind, as far as the conventions and amendments and those types of things, because I would probably stand here for a while and talk about some of the things that are going on, my position on the Article 5 convention process and so forth. And but no, there's been no overturning. And as a matter of fact, just real quick in summary, my position on any constitutional convention or Article 5 process, it's a waste of time. It does not solve the non-compliance. Madison didn't try to assume a new convention to amend it when they created the Sedition Act. What did he do? He basically said these are all violations. He went to the other states and we hope you agree with this. But they didn't. And so what he ended up having to do was their only last bag that they had was called nullification. And they said, we will nullify these laws and we will not enforce them. That was the last, act that they could do because the other states would not support the Constitution as they were duty-bound to do. Because, and we'll get into this in this, everybody takes an oath. If you're a political officer, and there are other offices that require oaths. And so, anyway, question over here, and then over here, down here.
Do you know anything about the history of executive orders?
I can tell you that Washington's first executive order, I was probably going to cover this tonight, or maybe not. If you read his first executive order, it is the recognition for this nation of Thanksgiving. And it has nothing to do with pilgrims and Indians and people starving. It had everything to do with recognizing the divine hand of providence in granting them this Constitution. So go read that first executive order. But in my first book, I do talk about how the president has strayed, the presidency has strayed in using their power in legislating, because executive orders are strictly, and Washington did this, as military orders. He gets a law, here comes the law from Congress, okay, and his executive order is the directions of how they're going to enforce this law or enact it. That's all an executive order is supposed to be. But it has grown into acts of legislation. Yes, sir.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for coming out and making this presentation. This is great information. I'm going to take a devil's advocate question here for you, okay?
Okay, just remember who you're going to be, though.
I'm a very practical person, and my observation is that the Constitution is widely disregarded already.
Yeah.
And this seems somewhat academic compared to present day reality, boots on the ground reality.
Okay.
So my question would be, how do you get to, from where we are today, widely disregarded, nobody cares anymore, it seems, sadly,
Right.
to what you're talking about? And is there an interim step or a series of interim steps that have to happen before we can even get to that point where people start waking up and they start actually doing something and following the Constitution for a change?
There you go right there. I will be answering that question in more detail than you probably care. If you ate something, I hope I don't give you indigestion. Question, sir. The mic's coming. Okay, here's the mic.
I don't think that Washington State would be the state to say, oh, we're going to be the first ones to go against this. And we're from Idaho, and I don't even think Idaho would be it because we're sort of overwhelmed by Boise. What would be the best state to focus on? And if they said, we're going to do it, would other states go along with them? Do they have to?
Sure. Go ahead.
My only question is, I think you're brilliant and I'm loving this and I'm ready to hear the next part. Can you start?
I'm humbled. I have no idea why my hard studies and so forth really came to the fruition of finding these things. I have yet to have a presentation where somebody doesn't come up or make a comment, post comment to an email or something. Why hasn't anybody ever thought of this? I don't know. If you read my bio, I had classical training in intelligence. I was in the immint community for a long time. I had 35 years in the intelligence community as an analyst and so forth. And so that classical training has always tried to get me to look at the big picture. Well, what's the big picture? And the big picture was they're not following the Constitution. I know all of these things. And then I started putting it together. They called it a contract. So in looking at all the facts, I was able to quickly... Again, I don't know why anybody didn't think that we had these powers. Madison basically just didn't write it out. Please audit the Constitution when they get too far off track. Because he knew they would. He actually thought that the Constitution was going to die 50 years after 1830, because in 1830 he was talking at the Virginia State Constitutional Convention, and he basically made a public comment that he goes, he doesn't see this Constitution going another 50 years because as the states started growing, the interest of the hinterland and the inside or interior of the states were going to be completely different than the west or the east coast. And he said, as this thing grows, he didn't think this Constitution was going to match that. And again, I really don't think Madison, recognized the divine hand of providence of what they really gave us. He thought that it was just more of a mechanical thing. If you understand Madison, he really was very conscientious in trying not to, create associations between religion. And as a matter of fact, if you understand what Madison was doing with his executive orders of giving fast and prayer for specific issues to the nation, he rescinded half of those requests of prayer going out. In other words, he asked the nation to pray as they were preparing for something, and then he felt, you know what, I think I might be overstepping my bounds, and he rescinded some of those. And so he was very conscientious of trying not to step on people's religious expressions and trying to dictate to them what they had to do. So anyway, I probably digressed a little bit in giving you some history, but it is Obama's fault. I'll just let you know that. Anyway, any other questions or without?
Yes.
Okay.
When an audit is conducted, there are findings and recommendations that are made for correction of corrective action.
Yep.
You've talked about the audit review. What do you see as the steps following that? I assume that if this was a management audit...
So that's my third book, and I've written it, but I haven't published it yet.
Okay. So you're going to keep us in suspense?
Oh, no. I just don't want to present that type of stuff now.
Okay.
The Constitution actually has all of this. The Constitution has the forces of what the states have, and to be able to, implement, their authority once again. But I'll get into that again when we're there. What I want to do is just get this out, this concept of being able to audit and stepping forward into taking the authority of the states and or the authority of the Constitution by the states back again and becoming a true constitutional republic. Okay? All right. Well, one more question. Yes, sir.
Well, one problem I like to suggest is some counties have sheriffs that have gone back to federal training on what the Constitution means, and they might not like what's being said and might want to stop it.
Oh, I can guarantee you that if my wife is very, very concerned. I go by GR. There's a reason for that. And it's not just those people. I'm really not too concerned about those people. I'm really more concerned about the people that will recognize that their billion-dollar, trillion-dollar industry, banking, and so forth will be truly impacted and affected, that we are actually going to take this country back by doing this. And they will lose their control over this country. If you garner that, as long as this message moves forward and it doesn't silence tonight, and it continues if everybody else tells an audience of 50 people and keeps going, because the whole point of creating these slides, I'll take this break right now in saying this, the whole point of creating these slides, and what I'm going to do next is kind of create the script so that people can get up and present these, go to another county. So I can't be everywhere. This is going to spread like wildfire if this starts moving. I can only be in so many places, so what I have to do is create constitutional warriors, and I need 100 in every state to be able to work in different counties and to be able to put the appropriate pressure where it needs to be applied at that given point in time. And so I truly am aware of what the threats are. My wife has pointed this out to me. And so I'm not too concerned with people that are teaching federalism. I mean, they're a little closer at least, right? They're a little closer than the progressives of democracy, and that we can do anything that we want to as long as we get the right votes and have a mob rule. So let me move forward. So what powers does the Constitution grant to the states? That's a live. Anybody know what the answer of that is? All powers not delegated to the federal government are granted inherently to the states. Okay, so when people want to know, well, they don't have this power. Absolutely, we have this power. Is it in the Constitution? What's that? Well, so that's kind of an implication, but the power of auditing the Constitution, who has the power? If it's not in the Constitution, that means that the states have that power. Yes, sir. You got to turn yourself on.
You say granted. The Constitution doesn't grant powers to the states. The states set those powers.
No, I understand that.
Okay.
I understand
Granted
that.
is like
But most people understand that the Constitution does grant powers to the federal government. They're delegated powers. So I get these constitutional organizations, well, where is that granted, that the states can do that? And I have to answer that question with, well, so what powers are granted to the states in the Constitution? Zero. Those are the powers. As a matter of fact, Nicholson said this. I give you a little story. Right after Madison spoke, June 8th, 1788, Nichols got up in supporting the Federalists, and he basically put it like this: if I had 1,000 acres and I delegated and gave and granted and bequeathed Mr. Christina a portion of those, do I have to resurvey my property to basically give myself a new deed? No. I still possess the property that I keep. I still possess the powers, responsibilities, and roles that I have not given up to Mr. Christina. And it's the same application. And I think Nichols really articulated it well in the Virginia ratification debates. Okay, so if we can get one state, this is what we got to do. We just need to get one state to start the initiatory process, because then it gets out of GR's hands. It gets out of me being able to go out and give this message, because now we've got a state that becomes the beacon. Does this make sense? And so this state's going to call upon all. So here's the trillion-dollar question. How do we get there from here? I'm going to tell you. What's that? Go to Oklahoma. Oh, so here's the big secret. State legislatures possess the power. When the Constitution needs to be changed, and as a matter of fact, Madison and Jefferson talk about this in the Kentucky, Virginia, and in the Virginia's follow-on in 1800 resolution, Madison clearly states that the states and the legislative bodies are duty-bound and obligated to step in. So if you go and read these resolutions, what Madison and Jefferson are saying is so powerful, it's just amazing. But the state legislatures are the guys that were in here, these three guys that stood up here. They're the ones that are supposed to be doing this. So it is their job to ensure compliance, and it's obviously something that they've not been doing and that they've been well asleep. So what is it our job? To wake them up. We've got to wake them up, and we've got to call them out. And I'll get to how and why. So how can we convince state legislatures to do their job in protecting us from federal tyranny? Well, as I've just quickly educated you on the Constitution, the whole fact of it's a contract, that we're the stakeholders and that we have these powers. We have to educate them that they possess this power. They don't even know they have this power because the education system didn't tell them. It's been very nefarious in how they have taught our constitutional powers and roles, that the federal government is powerful in all things. And everybody believes this. I'm telling you, the Constitution and the framers say absolutely differently. And so once we convince them to take the initiative, then the ball starts rolling on the floor of that state assembly, right? Because now they're going to be getting involved. And so we have two methods of motivation, right? Everybody understands the stick and the carrot, right? Okay, there's our motives. How are we going to use those? Well, before I get into that, I need to basically point out that there is one battlefield. And that primarily is here in the States. It's not in D.C. The most important battlefield for us in this room is this county. People to the north, it's in that county. And Olympia. We need to take this battlefield from our counties to Olympia and demand that they do their job. So we need two approaches to do this. And these happen simultaneously. And sometimes they can happen, so they can first start with a coalition. And as a matter of fact, I'm hoping that maybe these states that I'll talk about later, a coalition in Washington, Olympia, Washington, they actually start talking to some of these other legislatures in other states going, you know, you guys could be doing this. And that's how it gets rolling. So just like the Revolutionary War, these leaders actually acted upon themselves. They didn't have this big election. They didn't have to educate the electorate and say, you know, we think we want to revolt. What do you guys think about this? They were a republic at the time, and they were the representatives of the people, and because they were empowered to make those decisions. That's one of the reasons why we actually had a Revolutionary War, because they led and acted. Had they waited and said, well, we got to do a poll and survey like typical politics, we'd probably still be a part of the crown in the Commonwealth, right? So we don't have the time right now to really go into going through the election process, or I should say the educational process for everybody. And I'll get into this as far as educating, because people will get educated on this. But they didn't have the time at that time, and we don't have the time, and we have people that are empowered just like them. So there's no difference between what they did for the Revolutionary War and what we can do and what we need to do now. So again, educating all the leaders, and this is literally, when I say all the leaders, I mean the state party leaders. Guess what? There's a Constitution Party, and the Constitution Party chair lives in this area, and he actually supports my executive summary. Hopefully I get with him that he can take this at the party level to the national level. We need Susan Hutchinson of the Republican Party to take the time to read this. I know it takes an hour or so to read my executive summary and all the citations, but take the time to read this and get her on board and get all the party leadership as well as our politicians. And so what we have to do is get them, the politicians, to start building this coalition and network of those who are willing to support the Constitution. Motivating and uniting these leaders, to me, is very easy. Again, the stick and carrot thing. These leaders are serving for a reason. They have political motives, and some of these are noble and some of them aren't. But the point is that we want them to sign a petition. I want every elected official, and so far the elected officials that I've talked to, such as Ed Pace, Rob Rob, he hasn't read it yet, but those who have read it actually are on board and they want to sign the petition. So I'm batting 1,000 right now. I haven't found a politician that has come up with this lame excuse that they won't do it. But it's not just signing the petition. I need them to be advocates. They need to go to other legislatures, both within the state and outside the state. They need to become the salesmen and leaders, just like Madison and Hamilton. Those guys just didn't stay within the boundaries of their colony and state. They went well beyond that. So what we're going to do is get all these petitions pointing from the local level and even within the state and the state legislatures to go to all of the state legislatures and point out to them their constitutional responsibility and telling them that they have the power. So I've provided, I think, the documentation, the presentation. It's just a matter of just getting these people the facts and the information, and I truly believe that they're going to sign it if they are loyal to the Constitution. So what they have to do at this coalition level is basically go back to the states and say, if you do not have what this says up here, this Constitutional Committee of Correspondence, I'm basically doing the exact same thing they did in 1772. When Britain came in and basically took over all of the legislative bodies, the leaders that were in the legislative bodies created a committee of correspondence. Does anybody know about these committees of correspondence? Great. That was a shadow government. And that was a shadow government that was protecting individual liberty and sovereignty and demanding their rights as British citizens. Unlike the shadow government that we hear about today that is trying to actually throw us into subjugation and get rid of the Constitution. I'm telling you, the peril is so great that we don't have time. We need to really focus and concentrate our efforts on this. I know that there's other things that may be really important, but there's nothing greater than saving our Constitution Republic. So once we convince some of these reluctant guys, and the way to do this, because I haven't convinced them yet, but some of these reluctant guys or gals, Congress people in Congress, anybody that is a Republican or somebody that says they're loyal, we can actually start using these honors and privileges that they have as a leader. They've stepped into the fray of leadership. And so if they're truly honest, and if they truly mean that they're loyal to the Constitution, they're a humble servant, then they should, quickly sign once they've given. Remember that premise, reasonable people, equally informed, seldom disagree? These people shouldn't disagree too much, as long as they're being reasonable and as long as they understand what they should be doing. So the coalition needs to start communicating with the CCC, which is that Constitutional Committee of Correspondence. And as the legislatures start working down with the counties going, we need more petitions. We need petitions out of these counties, such as King County, Pierce, and so forth. So they're going to start enlisting the support of the counties. And as a matter of fact, these committees, I'll get into the details of these, but these committees are going to be motivating the local politicians and the local leadership at the county level. And so the county level, the grassroots effort, now that we're getting into that, they're going to manage these petitions for the city council, commissioners, and so forth, and I'll go through that. But here are the likely organizations that should be just eating this up. They should be eating Republic Review and saving the Constitution up. The Republicans, the Libertarians, and the Constitutional Party. They all agree that the Constitution's a contract and it is being violated severely. That's why here in this county, I've gotten all three chairs to basically agree that we need to do something and start standing for the Constitution again. So there are other organizations within the county, such as militias, oath keepers, and those types of things. Those people will support this as well. So it's just getting the word out to organizations that I will call friendly to this concept, getting those leaders to signing petitions. So we're starting to accumulate petitions from both elected officials and actual leadership within the county group. And so once these things start going through, they're going to manage these and they'll be forwarding those out. We must motivate group leaders, though, to unify. And that's one of the things I want to do with Spokane County, is get these party chairs not to abandon their responsibilities over their parties, but to basically start unifying that we're going to put the Constitution first. to make sure that our candidates are, the person that we're going to support and elect is the most constitutional candidate. Right now in Spokane County, it's all Republicans. There's no competition between libertarians, I think, in this race that I know of, and there's no competition with the Constitutional Party. And I've gotten both of those other parties to support the Republicans. In other words, they're going to endorse the Republicans because they're the most conservative, maybe not the most constitutional. But as we start moving this, we're going to start finding and bringing up and hopefully grooming better candidates that will actually lead in support of the Constitution. So each county will be required to unify organizations so that they can start leveraging more. You know that old saying, divided we stand, or I should say, united we stand, divided we fall. That's a correct adage. And the reason we've been losing elections in this county and in other counties is because we've been divided. The Libertarians, Constitutional, all these little factions over little things. It goes back to that fountain of power. If we unify that onto one thing, and that's the Constitution, and focus that all of our elected officials will support that, sign these petitions, and demand that our state steps up and does its job, then our problems are going to go away. It's that simple. So the CCC's focus is supposed to work with these political officials and getting them to sign, getting other leaders to sign. They're also going to have an established constitutional test and standards. They're going to get into the dissemination of these petitions. As a matter of fact, I talk about this in the next slide, but there needs to be some cross-pollinating and sharing of information and scripts and so forth. I may be a decent author, I don't know, but I know that there can be improvements made, and I'm always for, constant improvement. And so I truly believe that whatever I come up with in a petition may be good, but everybody can contribute and make these things better. The scripts and so forth, these committees are going to own these. I'm not saying that we have to have a single petition or a single script for the counties in working with their political officials. And this is going to be a document that a political official is going to sign. It's a petition that basically says, I recognize I'm living under federal tyranny and I demand my state legislate, something like that. Anyway, so I'm not saying that I'm the ultimate author of this, and actually I'm really not the leader in this. I'm just the guy with the idea. You already have leaders. Either your party chairs or organizations. I'm just a guy with a radio show and the thought that what we need to do, if this makes sense. But what these guys also have to do is they have to track voting records, hold their feet accountable. They're going to provide content, and here's the cross-pollination, right? So these CCCs in each county are going to start working with each other and improving their processes, because who knows? Out there in Ponderay, they actually may have a better petition that's just ironclad, right? And why can't we adopt that? It does not have to be written and signed and approved by one particular person. As a matter of fact, I've always said that, somebody else's eyes will, like a child's eyes can come up and solve a problem. I just think that we got to get past the language, and sometimes we just sweat over that. I've worked with perfectionists, and I think I put it up on one of the slides. Better is the enemy of good enough. And so just get your petitions, get your scripts, and start moving forward. There's going to be a financial structure that needs to be supported. We're going to need to find some people willing to either contribute their time, resources, money, or what have you, to basically going around getting petitions signed. We're going to have actual rubber to the road, getting somebody to sign a piece of paper. I don't want to do this e-signature because that could get corrupted. We could lose that. A physical paper, it could be burnt, but if we have physical security, I think we'll be fine. But bottom line, there is some finances that I think have to be addressed, so I wanted to make sure this is here, and I would recommend this be a 501c3 type of thing. Always nonprofit is always better, because when people contribute, then they get the tax write-off. Here's the thing, though. Washington did not fight the revolution based on non-taxable contributions, right? They didn't have that then. And so, this really requires loyal patriots. And that's what this CCC needs to identify. Who are the loyal patriot businesses and other people that can, philanthropists, anybody that's out there that loves the Constitution, wants to save it, this is the cause to get involved in. So the operations, again, the CCC is going to be conducting meetings. They're going to be setting up meetings with leaders to get them to sign petitions. If they need the materials, if they need a presentation, they'll send somebody out to give these presentations and basically go through, this is how we're going to do it. This is what you need to do. This is how we do it. So the objective, again, I'm going to repeat this, and they say in cells, if you repeat something 7 times, it actually sinks in. And so the objective is to get all political appointed or elected people that have to raise their arm to the square to sign a petition to demand their state legislatures audit the Constitution, right? We want them to actually step in and stop the federal tyranny. That's what we've got to do. If not, we're going to lose it all, folks. So in getting these objectives, in presenting this executive summary like I'm doing and reading the executive summary, this is the stuff that you've got. And you can do this better than me, probably. I'm not the best. I'm shaking in my boots up here. I'm always fearful in talking in front of a bunch of people. Well, at least I dry up in my mouth. Anyway, what we need to do is basically start getting this out, and I think this bottom bullet really says it all. I think we've been living in a third awakening that started in the 90s with the first ramping up of Hillary Care. And I think that there has been an awakening within America where churches are starting to step up and do their job, and patriots and the Patriot Party and so forth, the Tea Party. I'm telling you that now is the time. The awakening has already begun. And what we need to do is get these people the information of Republic Review, because I believe that that's what they're thirsting, and Republic Review is the nectar. And I'm not just saying that because I wrote this. I'm just saying that because nobody's been able to refute the constitutionality of Republic Review, that the states do have this power. Here's the carrot method. So I told you about the carrot method. I mentioned it a few times. There is a privilege and an honor to be renowned for reclaiming the republic, for unleashing economic opportunities, right? For expanding wealth, for enabling their constituents. All of these things will happen if we get federal tyranny out of our lives. Now, it doesn't mean Washington, Olympia won't be tyrannical, but bottom line, the Constitution doesn't protect us from state governments. That's on us, and we have to fix that through our process, but we can fix the federal problem very quickly. And so here's what I think are motivating factors for elected officials and state legislatures. They can become true leaders. I'll digress with a little story. Madison was the guy that wrote the Virginia plan, and I can go into the real details of this, but bottom line, when his plan was read by Governor Randolph at the Constitutional Convention, it was rejected. A real leader doesn't take personal offense, and they don't personalize. What I see in most people is they personalize stuff and they go, well, I'm going to take my ball and go home. That's the common thing. Madison had such integrity that as they went through the New Jersey plan, and then when Sherman presented the Connecticut Compromise of creating the bicameral Congress and recognizing state sovereignties and so forth, that's what they went with, and guess what? That's what Madison supported. He supported the whole thing. If you read his notes on the Constitutional Convention, you will find that he actually exposes some of his feelings. Like, he didn't like certain things, and he wrote that down. And so it's kind of interesting to see what he didn't like, but he still supported it. Right? I mean, that guy had true integrity to say, well, this is what we elected, this is what we got, this is the pig we dressed, and that's what we're going to the prom with, right? Anyway, it wasn't that bad. But anyway, this also does the last thing here. This, by them saving us from federal tyranny, means that they're compliant with their oath of office. The stick method, any guesses? Get them out of office. I say if they don't want to sign the petition, let them defend that position in the next election. And let the voters tear them apart. We may have to go with an unsavory, but if the CCC is doing their job, they'll already have a groomed constitutional candidate that is worthy of going forward and raising their arm to the square and replacing that person. They have to live up to their oaths, folks. So eventually we will want all candidates. As far as I'm concerned, I've been floating this idea and I've been seeing this more and more, and it was in my first book in 2013. We want all candidates to be able to pass a constitutional test, right? I mean, you have to pass a test to drive on the road, right? And, you know, so the state can trust you that you won't hurt yourself or anybody else. Well, I'm telling you, political officials and politicians can hurt more people than a single driver or somebody firing a weapon. As a matter of fact, cafe standards have killed thousands and thousands of people of what they've done to cars. Getting rid of DDT killed millions of people around the world, and there's no founded evidence that DDT was as bad as anybody said it was. I'm telling you, politicians can kill and have more harm and do more harm to us in our society than anybody else. And so having a constitutional test, I think, is paramount. You got to know if your bill you're signing is going to be a violation of the Constitution or not. If you don't know the Constitution, then how do you know? Anyway, I'm sorry. So our local targets and the politicians that we want to focus on, the sheriff, county commissioners, city council, blah, blah, blah. And as a matter of fact, there are a whole bunch of other obscure elected officials, utility, right? School board. There's all of these people that are elected, and guess what? They have to do this. I affirm or swear that I will support the Constitution. And as a matter of fact, I get into that. So don't let me jump ahead. It should be an equal honor for anybody that is a politician to be able to support the Constitution as well as taking our money in, you know, regulating and doing all of these other things as an elected official. I think that it is actually a greater honor to do the greater thing for the best of society in protecting individual liberty and sovereignty than any regulation a politician can say, I gave you this bill. We did these things to protect you. The greatest protection they can give us is to save that document. So the document in the battlefield, thank you, sir. What you need to do is you need to create in the states, in these CCCs, I should say, in the counties, you need to create a document for the battlefield. And what that can be is it can be a map. It can be a big, huge virtual document, but what you want to do is start putting faces, get their picture, their name, and their position, title, and whether they've signed the Constitution. This document is going to identify friend and foe. So that way, everybody that takes their arm to the square will be documented on this map, and we'll start working on them. And the ways, we're going to work on them two ways. We'll either try to motivate them with a carrot, or we'll use the stick and start grooming somebody to replace them. And, you know, in some of these small little bastions of maybe progressive areas, we may have a little problem, but the parties have other mechanisms, and I'll be working with them in getting people in there. But I truly believe that when it comes down to this one thing, the Constitution, most people, most red-blooded Americans will say, yeah, that Constitution's more important. And I believe we're going to find that some of these political officials and leaders on the progressive side will say, actually, the Constitution's archaic, we don't need it. And I want them to defend those comments in the next election. Don't you? So we have to demand our leaders protect us again. I've said this the seventh time probably. We need to be protected from federal tyranny. And what this process is in this election and vetting and getting constitutional candidates in is separating the wheat from the chaff. It's a slow process, but we can do it. So why are we targeting these elected officials instead of citizens? If this doesn't make sense, then hopefully this, what I said earlier, might ring a bell. We're a republic, and these are our representatives. We have empowered them to do things. They represent, how many people in this county, in Spokane County? How much? About 350,000. So the county commissioners represent 350,000. The sheriff represents 500,000. Okay, I stand literally corrected. And so these people actually, when they write a petition to the state legislatures, it's not coming from Rob Chase. It's coming from a representative of 500,000 people. And they can put this in their petition that as the representative of the county of Spokane, I am demanding that you do your job in protecting us. Does that make sense? So that's why citizens, I'm just one person. We're just one person. We'd have to flood them with millions and millions of petitions to equate what some of these other representatives already represent. So that's why if the Revolutionary War, they used the representatives, and the representatives were just leaders. They just did the right thing. I'm just trying to echo that exact same direction. So if we haven't noticed, the current process has failed. Electing people, counting on the courts to protect us from federal tyranny and so forth, it's been failing. This is why we really have to do this. And so we need to get our elected officials to represent us and protecting that Constitution. So here it is. This is the oath. What's that first line? I will support the Constitution. If you're doing anything, you're violating your oath if you're doing anything that does not support the Constitution. The Hearst decision does not support the Constitution. Doing business with unconstitutional government does not support the Constitution. Does that make sense? Everybody in Olympia that is signing on with anything EPA, energy, anything that is unconstitutional, they're violating their oath. That's why the framers were brilliant in demanding that oaths of office in supporting this Constitution separates them. I mean, it's in the Constitution. Yes, it is. Yeah. Could you repeat the question? I can't articulate the word for word. Oh, sure, absolutely, yes. So the gentleman's saying that our representatives are not only violating the U.S. Constitution, but they're also violating the state. And every state actually tags in that their own Constitution, that they support it as well as the U.S. Constitution. But come on, folks, it's listed first, right? Come on, do your job. Actually, if you could hold on to your questions, I'm getting close to the end.
Just a quick comment. City of Spokane Valley, we changed our oath of office, so it now reads, I will support and defend the Constitution of both the United States and the state of Washington.
Yeah, because the minimum standard is that you have to at least support it. And defending it is that step beyond. In other words, you're going to gird up your loins and go to war, right? In supporting, you're supposed to do your job and not do anything that would be a detriment to it. But defending it means you're actually going out and becoming the advocate for it. So it does matter. And as a matter of fact, to get somebody to read my executive summary, like I said before, if you read some of these founding documents, it'd probably take you 20 minutes. I think that if you're a novice and it's the first time you read my executive summary, I've heard some people take maybe 2 hours. Look at the opportunity cost of what that 2 hours can do for you. It will, if you understand the Constitution somewhat, it'll broaden your paradigm. If you believe the progressive paradigm, it will totally shift your paradigm to understanding that the states and their role and responsibility within this Constitution. And so I have a hard time understanding why somebody just can't take the time. I know we're all busy, but we're all here because of one reason, because we love the Constitution. That's why I have a lot of hope and faith that everybody in this room becomes constitutional warriors. If you understand what Aristotle said in politics, the two reasons for revolution are you're not feeding your people. In other words, if the people are starving, look at the Arab Spring. Because they were starving, they revolted. That is the driving factor behind most. The French Revolution was they were starving. It's just that the communist movement failed. Anyway, because it came from the communes and the communist movement was actually seated there. But I don't want to digress too much. But what Aristotle said was the other reason for a revolution was when the people realized that the politicians are getting rich off of their hard work, off of their backs. And that's when people just say, enough with this. And it's not just our politicians that are doing this in violating our Constitution. It is globalists and so forth. And that's why I say when the message starts getting out, I don't want to be the only public enemy number one. I want to share that with you. I mean, I want you guys to be a part of this. I really do. It's not about GR having his name in lights or his name on a tombstone. It's about, doing the right thing, right? Managers do things right because there's a process and that's what they're supposed to do. A leader does the right thing. If somebody's going to die because of the process, then the leader will step in and stop. We're not going to do that because that person's going to die. That's what a leader does. And I'm just trying to be a leader, and I want you to be leaders as well. So we're going to educate everybody, but we can't educate the electorate. We don't have the time to do this. As a matter of fact, if you look at the Moses analogy, I like telling people, how long did it take Moses to educate Israel and to change their culture? It took 40 years. 40 years before they could go in the promised land. And he had unattested access to them. He performed miracles. They fed off of manna, right? The Lord fed them in the desert. They were saved by looking at a staff. They had all of these different miracles, and it still took 40 years. We don't have that time, right? We have to change the paradigms of leaders and get leaders to act and recognize that now's the time to do it. And that's one of the reasons why I believe in cancer education. That what will happen is people will start seeing these leaders saying, we've got to do this. We're going to dismantle all this Leviathan and well, can we live without those things? Well, they're going to get cancer education. What does cancer education mean? When you know somebody's got cancer in your family, the first time your life has been touched by that, what's the first thing you do? My father had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I went and read on that. I got smart on that and tried to help my dad in fighting that. That's what I call cancer education. So when people start realizing that they're doing something to save the country, well, if they really care, they're going to get educated. If not, then there are other educational programs that we literally need to get in, and I'm working actually with a certified educational system that's actually coast to coast, and they're expanding it to including this new paradigm of states' authority and powers to audit. And so anyway, we'll have an education program later once this convention really starts moving and enforces, and my third book gets published. So anyway, that's one of the reasons why it's not that I don't care about the people. We don't have the time, right? So what we have to do, again, and I've already covered this, we have to formulate ironclad petitions and ironclad scripts so that we can do robotic type of presentations. If you've ever been to a Bose presentation, they're very robotic. They say the exact same words if you're in one store to another and so forth, using their marketing terms and everything else. It's the same thing. As long as we don't stray from the content and stray from the heart of the message, anybody can get up here and give this, whether you're reading a script and just pointing through the slides. I don't have to be the one. That's my point. I don't have to be the one, and that's why I want you to get my slides and share them with people. Get my executive summary and share them with people. Again, the status quo has been failing us, and I can't repeat that enough. We have to get a CCC formed, and we need to get we need to support them. We need to support the Republican, Libertarian, and constitutional parties in uniting and vetting constitutional candidates and ensuring that the people that are going to be elected that are coming up from the ranks, whether they be PCOs or they just be Joe on the street, that they have to understand the Constitution, and they have to be the ones that have become advocates and defending it. Okay? So what we need to do, again, is we need to start reaching out to adjacent states, and I've already talked about this, and here they are. We're really close to the end, folks. This is the good. These are the good states. There's 34 good states, and if you can't read this, you will when you get the soft copy of this. But these blue states, if you look right here to the right, that's a ratio. In other words, in Wyoming, they almost have 6 Republicans to 1 Democrat. And that's almost the same in Utah. They have 5 Republicans to 1 Democrat. Down to the bottom of the blue in Virginia, it's 2 to 1. 2 to 1. So these states are the most likely candidates that actually, should be able to receive this and go, you know what, I do represent a constitutional founded party, hopefully. And if not, they can be rooted out really quick. Right? And again, here's Washington in the gold. It's not that they deserve any gold, but that's how close Washington is to flipping to become a green. Right down here. Let me get the pointer here. There's Washington right there. New Mexico is the 34th state. So actually they have 34 states that have Republican control, a trifecta actually, both houses and the governor. So here's the priority: Wyoming, Utah. Does this help? I think this answers your question. Somebody was asking, where do we want to start? There you go. Those are the states. If you know people in those states, anybody that has affluence in those states, get your people educated. And I'll be happy to fly out there. I'll be happy to talk and so forth. I'm cheap. I am. Second priority, third, and fourth priority. So we have to start socializing. I love that word, right? We want to socialize this idea in a good way. So we have to get started with the CCC locally. We got to get this model going so that we can actually start duplicating this model in every county in the Republic. As this idea goes forward, it will be like a fire on the landscape with the wind, with the prevailing wind just blowing it from one coast to the next. Does that make sense? I think so. I'm getting a little more drier here. I want to re-edify you on this whole point of knowledge and power and this whole focusing. As you start to understand these principles, and it's really simple, I don't have to make this very complicated. We have the power at the state level. The states can take this back. And if you understand that, and that becomes the knowledge factor for you, then let's start focusing our fountain of power with our representatives and get them to make it about the Constitution. And that's where the reason our representatives and leadership are all over the map, because we keep on putting them there. It's about abortion. It's about immigration. It's about refugees. No, it's about the Constitution. Have I said that enough? I apologize. So if we start using the Constitution as our weapon and our shield, both in the political fray and in the public fray, we're going to win battles. We'll win every single one, because every red-blooded American loves their freedom of expression. They love their freedom of speech. They love their immunities from illegal search and seizure, those types of things. As a matter of fact, even the liberals have tried to chant this. Now they want to take them away from you. They're this close, and they're actually surfacing these ideologies, and it's becoming a part of their mantra. Free school for everybody at your expense. We know that that's not constitutional. So, again, these slides are available for everybody. And so I'll put these up. If you follow me on Facebook, I will basically announce when I've got these things converted to PDF and actually up on my website. I have two domains. It's reclaimingtherepublic.org and Mobley Strip Press. Any questions? I put everybody to sleep. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rob.
I turned the heat up.
Okay, this is more of a comment than a question, but along these lines, Sunday night we're having a Level 1 Center for Self-Governance, Keep the Republic, and that's the Valley Library. And it's the best money I ever spent is $50, but there's 5 levels, and several of you have been to this, so it's Level 1. Then Level 2 is at, if you've already taken Level 1, is at the Otis Orchards Library Monday night, so Mark Herr will be here Sunday and Monday night, so try to get signed up for that. If you've already taken it, it's just $10 to audit again. So just wanted to say that. Thank you.
No, thank you. I've got a mic.
Oh, okay, sorry.
He's got it.
Anybody else? Questions?
And just to piggyback on what Rob said, what GR is saying here ties in very, very closely with what the Center for Self-Governance is trying to teach. So I think it's a very symbiotic relationship between the two of them. So thank you, GR.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, Madison dreaded the electorate, that he knew that he could not create an aristocracy or allow one to be formed with the new government. And so they really tried, and he made that public knowledge. He actually said in the Federalist Papers that this nation was a nation of illiterates. And we're even more illiterate about the Constitution today than they were back then. So he wanted, and they ended up creating what I believe was a government of self-governance that was protecting us from ourselves by distributing sovereignty to these different levels. But anyway.
There's the websites up there on the screen.
Yeah, and that's a Mobius strip press right there. All right, that's a Mobius strip, I should say. And as a matter of fact, I'll do this, I usually do this one time where I'm in a forum like this. I don't do this very often, but if anybody can tell me what all 5 of these documents are, I'll give you $20.
The Declaration of Independence.
Okay, the fifth one. I'm sorry, who what?
Northwest.
Nope, nope. Nope. Pardon me?
Federalist Papers.
Yeah, they're up there. As a matter of fact, you can actually see Federalist right there.
Yeah.
I tried to make it easy for everybody. Well, I'll tell you.
Bill of Rights.
Nope, nope. So a Mobius strip is a continuum of a relative surface. Mobius strip press is a continuum of a relative concept. And what I'm trying to talk about here is individual liberty and sovereignty. And this particular document right there was the beginning in civilized society known as the Magna Carta in 1215. Where actually people and the king acknowledged individual sovereignty of the citizens. So there you go. That's why I don't do this that often, but I actually had a homeschooler get this. So anyway, hats off to homeschooling. If there's no other questions, thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending your opportunity cost here.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll get out. I guess we're all done. Just a reminder, it'd be nice to pay our bills, so if you drop any money in, it's really grateful. And we appreciate you all being here. The video will be up by the end of the weekend, so
Oh, did
be
I
able to
mention
share
the
it with
books?
people. Oh yeah, mention the books.
I'm
then.
sorry. I thought I mentioned this, that I do have my 2 books for sale here. Over half the proceeds will go to Northwest Grassroots. So anyway, I typically just do this to help the hosting organization because I know this costs money to do this. So anyway, they're back there in the corner if you want them. Thank you.